Today, our cruise stopped in Tortola in the British Virgin Islands. If you're stopping there on a cruise and trying to figure out what the day actually feels like, this video is for you. We take a scenic island tour in an open-air van, spend time at the beach, stop at Pusser's Landing, and end the day back around the cruise port. This is not a perfect travel guide. It's a real look at what our Tortola cruise stop actually feels like.
Where shall we go on this 44 and bound journey?
Good morning from Tortola in the British Virgin Islands. Today we're starting right at the cruise port in Tortola. For this stop, we booked a scenic island tour through the cruise line, and instead of riding in a typical tour bus, we rode in a converted open-air truck. This tour was really about the ride, the views, the beach, and getting some fresh air along the way. At first, riding in the open-air van felt a little tricky, especially when we started going up and down through the hills, but once you get used to it, it's actually a pretty fun way to see the island. One piece of advice I would give is to be mindful of where you're sitting, especially if you're on the end. Tortola has a lot of twists, turns, hills, and drop-offs, so you'd probably feel a bit more nervous than being in a regular bus. Once we left the port area, we were riding through Road Town, which is the capital of the British Virgin Islands and the main town on Tortola. This is where you get the first look beyond the cruise pier. You see the streets, local businesses, traffic, people moving around, and the everyday side of the island before the tour starts climbing into the hills. Road Town is not really the part of the tour that feels scenic in a postcard sense, but it helps kind of set the scene. You realize pretty quickly that Tortola is not just beaches and overlooks. It's also a working island with a real town right next to a cruise port. Once we got past Road Town, the island started to change pretty quickly. Tortola is a very hilly island, so you're not just driving straight from one stop to the next. You're climbing, turning, dropping back down, and then doing it all over again. That was one of the things I noticed most about the tour. A lot of the experience happened between the stops. You'd pass through a neighborhood, catch a quick view of the water, turn a corner, and suddenly the scenery would open up again. It wasn't always dramatic, but kind of had a rhythm to it. You get a little bit of a town or village, a little bit of a hillside, a little bit of coastline, and then back into the mountains again. As we rode through Tortola, you could see small pieces of the island's history and culture along the way, in the artwork, the buildings, and the layout of the town. That's one of the tricky things about cruising. You get to visit a lot of places, but your time in each one is limited. On this tour though, our driver added helpful context as we went. He talked about the crops, the history, local medicine, and everyday life on the island. So even though it was still a short cruise excursion, it felt like more than just a ride to the beach. Riding in the open air also changed the experience. You could feel the breeze, hear the road, and see things as they come up around you. Our beach stop was Cane Garden Bay Beach, one of the more popular beach areas in Tortola, where we got to spend about an hour and a half. When we arrived, it had that easy cruise stop beach feel: chairs, umbrellas, beach bars, vendors, and people spread out along the shoreline. There were different places to grab food, drinks, and souvenirs, so it didn't feel isolated, but still had a relaxed pace. For this part, I'm going to let the beach speak for itself and take you on a walk along Cane Garden Bay. I think the tide must be coming in. After spending some time at Cane Garden Bay Beach, we got back into the van and continued across Tortola toward Frenchman's Key, home to Pusser's Landing. And I'll say this, our driver handled the roads really well. Tortola has a lot of hills, curves and tight turns, but he was confident, capable, and clearly knew what he was doing.
Bottom left, this is our fishing village. This is where you can find most of the fishermen that live on the island of Tortola, Carrot Bay, or fishing village.
So even though the ride felt a little adventurous at times, I could tell that we were in good hands.
Don't forget, the roads are like natural roller coasters.
The route toward Frenchman's Key gave the ride a different kind of view. Not just beaches and water, but more of the island's history mixed into the everyday scenery. We passed waterfront areas, hillside roads, and places connected to Tortola's old sugar plantation history. You could still see reminders of that past in some of the older structures and ruins along the way. We also passed an old Methodist church, which stood out because it gave the ride a little more texture. It was one of those moments where the scenery shifted from beach views to small pieces of local history and community.
Frenchman ski. Our next stop is going to be at Frenchman ski.
Frenchman's Key shifts the day from beach scenery to more of Tortola's sailing culture. The British Virgin Islands are made up of more than 60 islands and keys. That geography is a big part of why sailing is such a major part of life and tourism here. People sail between the islands, stop at marinas, visit smaller beaches and coves, and use boats to experience parts of the British Virgin Islands that you just can't see from a cruise port alone. So after the beach, Pusser's Landing gave the day a different feel. Less sand and shoreline and more marina, sailboats, shops, and waterfront walking. After leaving Frenchman's Key, we made our way back toward the cruise port. By this point, the tour was starting to wind down, and the day shifted from beaches and marina views back into that familiar cruise port atmosphere. The port area in Tortola has some of what you can expect from a Caribbean cruise stop. Shops, drinks, music, people walking around, and everyone slowly making their way back toward the ship.
It's gonna be a long night, sweet souls. Come on, girl, I remember you.
It felt a little more open than some other ports we visited. Some of the buildings are standalone, so it doesn't feel quite as much like one long manufactured shopping strip. It has more of an open-air market feel in some spots. The boardwalk adds a nice touch too because it runs right along the water. You can see boats passing by, look back toward the harbor, and still feel like you're connected to the island instead of being completely boxed in. So before heading back to the ship, we took a little time to walk around, enjoy the waterfront, and grab a Painkiller. Very popular drink on the island. And with that, we made our way back to the ship. For us, Tortola was a slower, more relaxed cruise stop. Beach time, island roads, marina views, and a little port atmosphere at the end. But that's just the version of Tortola we experienced. Depending on what you book, this island can probably feel very different. Some people may come here for sailing, snorkeling, hiking, beach hopping, or a more adventurous day out on the water. Our day was more scenic and easygoing, and I think that's what made it work. Thank you so much for coming along. Until next time, stay grounded, stay grateful, and go everywhere.